Have you ever met someone whose presence feels like a quiet storm? A person who moves through the world with an unshakable depth, as if they hear whispers from a hidden dimension the rest of us ignore. They don't command attention with loud words or forceful gestures. Instead, they draw you in like a magnet, their silence heavier than most people's speeches. What is it about these individuals that makes them seem so attuned to the unseen currents of life, so fluent in the language of symbols, dreams, and unspoken truths? Carl Jung, the Swiss psychiatrist and philosopher, devoted his life to mapping these very depths, the uncharted territories of the human psyche where intuition, myth, and shadow dance in the twilight of consciousness. To study Jung is to step into a world where the mind is not just a collection of thoughts but a vast, living cosmos. His work whispers to us that we are not merely individuals but fragments of something older, wiser, and far more mysterious. The deep thinker, in Jung's vision, is not merely intelligent but initiated, someone who has dared to descend into the labyrinth of their own soul and returned with treasures buried beneath layers of collective forgetting. Imagine standing at the edge of a great forest at dusk. The trees sway in a wind you cannot see, their leaves murmuring secrets in a language just beyond your grasp. This is the realm Jung invites us into, a place where logic alone is a dim lantern, barely illuminating the path. Here, the symbols of our dreams are not random but coded messages from the unconscious. The fears we suppress, the myths we inherit, the archetypes that shape our loves and wars, they are not abstract ideas but living forces, as real as the pulse in your wrist. Yet, this is not some esoteric fantasy reserved for mystics. Jung's psychology is startlingly practical because it speaks to the very core of what it means to be human. Have you ever felt a sudden, inexplicable connection to a stranger, as if you've known them in another life? Or been haunted by a recurring dream that defies interpretation? These are not glitches in the system but clues, fragments of a grander narrative written in the ink of the collective unconscious. So, let us begin this journey where the surface cracks and the depths beckon. For to understand Jung is to understand the hidden architecture of your own mind, the silent forces that shape your desires, your fears, and the unseen hand that guides your steps when you think no one is watching. To step into Jung's world is to realize that the mind is not a solitary island but a vast, interconnected continent, part of a shared psychic landscape that stretches beyond time and culture. At the heart of his psychology lies the concept of the collective unconscious, a reservoir of human experience deeper than personal memory, where archetypes, the primordial patterns of human existence, reside like ancient gods waiting to be summoned. These are not mere metaphors but living energies. The hero, the shadow, the anima and animus, the wise old man, the trickster. They emerge in our dreams, our myths, and even in the roles we unconsciously play in daily life. Have you ever met someone who seemed to embody the rebel, the nurturer, or the destroyer so perfectly it was as if they were channeling something far older than themselves? That is the archetype at work, an invisible hand shaping personality from the depths. Equally vital is Jung's exploration of the shadow, the repressed, denied, or unacknowledged parts of ourselves that we exile into the dark corners of the psyche. Yet, like a disowned twin, the shadow does not vanish, it lurks, projecting itself onto others in bursts of irrational dislike or fascination. The person who irritates you beyond reason, the flaw you spot instantly in strangers but never in yourself. These are mirrors held up by the shadow. Jung's radical proposition? That true wholeness comes not from conquering these hidden aspects but from facing them, dialoguing with them, even embracing their wisdom. The saint must acknowledge their capacity for cruelty. The rebel must confront their longing for surrender. Only then does the fragmented self begin to heal. Then there is individuation, Jung's grand opus of psychological maturation. The lifelong pilgrimage toward becoming who you truly are, beyond societal masks and inherited scripts. This is not mere self-improvement but a sacred unraveling and reweaving of identity. It demands confronting the paradoxes within. Light and dark, masculine and feminine, chaos and order. The individuated person is not perfect but complete, a symphony where every discordant note has its place. Think of the elder who speaks with quiet authority, not because they have all the answers but because they have made peace with their questions. That is individuation in motion. And how could we ignore synchronicity, Jung's mysterious principle of meaningful coincidence? Those moments when the inner and outer worlds align in a way that defies logic yet feels undeniably significant. The dream of a white bear that manifests the next day in a stranger's story. The sudden intuition to call an old friend just as they were thinking of you. Jung saw these not as random flukes but as glimpses into a deeper order, where psyche and reality are not separate but entwined in a dance we barely comprehend. These themes are not abstract theories but living forces, as real as the heartbeat of a man standing at the crossroads of his life, torn between safety and destiny. Jung's genius was in showing that the path to wisdom is not upward, into the light of pure reason, but downward, into the fertile darkness where the roots of the soul drink from waters older than civilization. There is a story Jung loved to tell about a rainmaker from rural China that reveals more about the human psyche than 1,000 academic papers ever could. A terrible drought had parched a village, and despite the prayers of priests and the efforts of scientists, the skies remained barren. Finally, an old rainmaker was summoned from a distant province. He arrived, surveyed the land with quiet eyes, and asked for a small hut on the outskirts of town. For 3 days, he did nothing but sit in silence. Then, on the 4th day, rain began to fall. Not just rain, but a great, drenching storm that revived the dying fields. When the villagers asked how he had performed this miracle, the old man simply replied, "I did nothing. When I came, I saw that the village was out of harmony with heaven. So I sat until I too was out of balance. Then, when harmony was restored within me, the rain came naturally." This parable is the essence of Jungian psychology, not control, but alignment. The rainmaker understood what modern man has forgotten, that the inner world and outer world are not separate realms but reflections of one another. The drought was not just a meteorological event but a manifestation of collective disconnection, a spiritual malaise made visible. Jung saw the same principle at work in the crises of individuals and societies. When we are fractured within, when we deny our shadows, ignore our dreams, or silence the whispers of our deeper selves, the universe responds in kind, manifesting our discord as failed relationships, inexplicable anxieties, or a haunting sense of meaninglessness. The rainmaker's secret was that he knew how to listen, not just with his ears but with his bones, to the subtle rhythms that most of us drown out with noise and distraction. Then there is the alchemical tradition that so fascinated Jung, not as primitive chemistry but as the grand metaphor of psychological transformation. The alchemists spent lifetimes laboring in their smoky workshops, not merely to turn lead into gold but to perfect their own souls. Their cryptic symbols, the blackening, nigredo, the whitening, albedo, the reddening, rubedo, were maps of inner metamorphosis. The prima materia they sought was not a physical substance but the raw, unrefined self, heavy with potential. In their furnaces, they enacted the same drama that unfolds in therapy rooms and meditation halls today. The dissolution of the old identity, the purification of intention, and the final integration of opposites into something transcendent. A modern man staring into his smartphone is no different from the alchemist staring into his flask. Both are searching, consciously or not, for the philosopher's stone that will make sense of their suffering. And what of dreams, those nightly messengers from the unconscious? Jung did not see them as random neural fireworks but as letters from a wiser, older self, written in a language of symbols that must be deciphered with care. A woman dreams of being chased through a maze by a faceless figure, a man dreams of finding a forgotten room in his childhood home. These are not nonsense but urgent communications. The maze is the psyche itself, with its winding defenses and hidden chambers. The faceless pursuer is the shadow, demanding recognition. The forgotten room is some neglected potential, some atrophied gift waiting to be rediscovered. To work with dreams, Jung taught, is to sit at the feet of a sage who speaks in riddles, knowing that the truth arrives sideways or not at all. These narratives, the rainmaker, the alchemist, the dreamer, are not quaint relics but living mirrors. They show us that the most profound transformations often happen in silence, in darkness, in the spaces between our thoughts. The modern world worships the visible and the immediate, but Jung reminds us that the real work happens underground, where roots twist towards secret waters. What does it mean to live as a deep thinker in a world that prizes speed over depth, distraction over contemplation? Jung's wisdom becomes truly vital when we stop treating it as philosophy and begin wielding it as a tool for daily transformation. Consider the modern epidemic of burnout, not merely physical exhaustion but a soul-deep weariness that no amount of sleep can cure. The Jungian approach would ask not how to manage this fatigue better, but what the fatigue is trying to communicate. Perhaps your relentless productivity is a compensation for unlived creative impulses, or your people-pleasing masks a terror of your own authentic voice. The solution isn't another productivity hack but the courageous work of shadow integration, sitting with the uncomfortable truths your business helps you avoid. When a corporate lawyer begins painting in secret, when a nurse admits her secret rage at always being the caregiver, they aren't being self-indulgent but initiating the alchemical process of turning leaden obligations into golden selfhood. Relationships, too, become radically redefined through a Jungian lens. We've all experienced that magnetic pull towards certain people. The friendships that feel like reunions, the romances that crack us open in ways we can't explain. Jung would say these are not random attractions but unconscious recognitions, archetypal patterns playing out between souls. The partner who infuriates you with their passivity may be mirroring your own disowned dependence. The friend whose ambition intimidates you might reflect ambitions you buried to avoid threatening others. This perspective transforms conflict into initiation. Every argument becomes an opportunity to retrieve lost fragments of yourself. The most ordinary marriage becomes a crucible for individuation when two people stop demanding change from each other and start confronting the projections they've placed on one another. Even our collective crises take on new meaning when viewed through this depth psychological lens. The environmental catastrophe isn't just a failure of policy but a manifestation of humanity's severed connection with the anima mundi, the world soul. Political polarization reflects not just ideological differences but mass shadow projection, where groups attribute all evil to the other side rather than facing the darkness within their own movements. Social media addiction reveals our starvation for genuine symbolic life. Scrolling becomes a poor substitute for the mythic narratives that once gave cultures meaning. The solutions to these crises must therefore be not just practical but symbolic. We need new rituals to mourn ecological loss, spaces for collective shadow work, and art that resurrects archetypes of unity rather than division. The transformational call here is urgent yet subtle. To become archaeologists of your own psyche. Start by observing the patterns you've labeled as just how I am, your recurring relationship conflicts, the compliments you deflect, the dreams that linger upon waking. Keep a journal not of events but of symbols. The song that got stuck in your head today, the stranger who stood out in a crowd, the childhood memory that surfaces during your commute. Practice active imagination. Jung's method of dialoguing with dream figures or emotions as if they were autonomous beings. Ask your anger what it protects, your anxiety what it foresees. Most radically, begin thanking your defenses for their service before gently asking if they might loosen their grip. This isn't navel-gazing but soul cultivation, the meticulous gardening of inner landscapes so your outer life can bear better fruit. Jung's final lesson may be this. Depth isn't found by adding more to your life, but by plunging into what's already there. The mystical isn't hidden in some far-off realm but woven into your most ordinary moments. The déjà vu at the grocery store, the synchronicity of a friend calling as you think of them, the strange peace that comes when you stop running from your own contradictions. To think deeply isn't to become more intellectual but more porous, to let the world speak through you in symbols, to recognize yourself as both the dreamer and the dreamed. The Rainmaker's secret wasn't technique but presence, the willingness to become still enough that the heavens could recognize themselves in him. Your life, your relationships, your very era are waiting for you to do the same.